The year is 2002, and Nissan brings back a name that had been missing for years. After a long gap and an uncertain direction through the late 90s, the company needed something to remind people what it was capable of. What it introduced was the Nissan 350Z, a car that didn't try to chase everything at once, but instead focused on something simpler. But the question is, was it a true return to form, or just a modern reinterpretation of what the Z used to be? At the time, the expectations were different from what they had been before. Earlier, Z cars had built their reputation around being affordable, fun, and slightly rough around the edges. Cars that prioritize driving feel over refinement. But by the early 2000s, the industry had changed. Cars were becoming heavier, safer, and more refined, and Nissan had to decide where the new Z would fit into that landscape. So, instead of going extreme, they went focused. Under the hood sat the VQ35DA, 3.5-liter naturally aspirated V6, producing around 287 horsepower in early models. Not the highest number in its class, but enough to make the car feel quick. What mattered more was how the power came in. It was linear, predictable, and easy to use, giving drivers confidence rather than overwhelming them. And that approach carried through the rest of the car. Power was sent to the rear wheels through a 6-speed manual or a 5-speed automatic, paired with a short wheelbase and a relatively wide track. The result was a car that felt planted, but also willing to move when pushed. It wasn't the lightest car. And it didn't try to hide that, but the way the chassis was set up made it feel balanced enough to be enjoyable in a wide range of situations. And that's where the conversation around the 350Z really begins. Because depending on who you ask, the car can feel either raw and engaging, or slightly heavy and unrefined. The steering gives enough feedback to understand what the front end is doing, but it's not as communicative as some older cars. The chassis is stable, but it doesn't always feel as precise at the limit. But at the same time, that might be part of the point. Because the 350Z wasn't designed to be perfect. It was designed to be usable. It had enough power to be fun, enough grip to feel stable, and enough personality to stand out. Without becoming difficult to drive, it didn't demand constant attention, but it rewarded it when you gave it. And over time, that balance started to matter more. Because while other cars in its segment focused on being sharper or faster, the 350Z built its reputation around being consistent. It was a car you could drive every day, take to a track, or modify without running into major limitations. And that versatility became one of its defining traits. Then there's the aftermarket. This is where the 350Z started to separate itself. The VQ engine proved to be reliable and capable. The chassis responded well to suspension upgrades, and the car became a common platform for drifting, track use, and street builds. It wasn't just a car you drove. It was a car you could shape into something different depending on what you wanted, and that flexibility gave it a second identity. Because while it may not have dominated headlines when it first came out, it slowly built a presence in car culture. Not through numbers or marketing, but through use. Through people actually driving it, modifying it, and pushing it in different directions. But why does this matter? Because the 350Z represents a different kind of success. It wasn't the fastest, it wasn't the most refined, and it wasn't trying to be the best at everything. Instead, it focused on being accessible, adaptable, and consistent in a way that made it relevant to a wide range of drivers. And that approach tends to age differently. Because cars that try to dominate one category often get replaced quickly. But cars that do a lot of things well tend to stick around. They become platforms, not just products. Which is why, years later, the 350Z is still part of the conversation. Some see it as a proper return to the Z formula, others see it as a step toward something more modern. But regardless of how it's viewed, it's clear that the 350Z didn't try to be everything. It just needed to be enough.